Welcome, everyone. I'm Michaela Morris, the VP of Programming at AMA Phoenix. I believe I have met a lot of you, but if you haven't met, very excited to have you here. Today, we have a great webinar planned for you guys on generative AI as a catalyst for marketing success with our guests here from the Holistyx Group. So I'll run you through a quick agenda of what we're going to be covering today. So we'll jump right into the webinar content. We'll have some time for some Q&A at the end with the Holistyx Group, and then stick around for a few minutes at the end. We're going to go through some housekeeping items of what's coming up next for AMA Phoenix. And just as a brief introduction before we jump in, I just kind of wanted to share who our panelists are today. So we have all coming here from the Holistyx Group, all over different parts of the US, as we were mentioning earlier. So we have Sree Sundaram, we have Andrew Wolff, and we have Arthur Milano, who's based here in Phoenix, but they'll be taking us through our webinar today. So with that, I'll pass it off to you guys.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming out to the webinar. This is a great opportunity for us to connect with you all and share some of our experience and learning around generative AI. And happy Juneteenth, and thank you for spending the time with us. So today is going to be a bit of a journey and a journey of discovery. So we're going to be focusing on generative AI, but we also want to make it actionable. So we are aligning all of our guidance here towards how we can assist your marketing efforts. So these are different tools, techniques, foundational things that we've come across over 20 plus years of experience in doing this. So this team has focused on delivering digital transformations for businesses for a little bit of echo. For the last 20 plus years. And part of our mantra is simplifying the complexity of change. So any large scale transformation is necessarily complex. Generative AI is no different from any of the other mega trends like mobile computing and even the PC itself, and helping people to understand how they can wrap their minds around using this new technology to further their business. So we're looking to give you practical insights, real examples, and a clear path forward. So if we can begin with a quick pulse check, we would like to understand where you all are in your AI journey. And I won't answer the poll, even though it just popped up. So just take a couple of minutes and we'll talk. We'll do a little bit further introduction on the team. So we've got kind of three different perspectives coming to you today with one mission to help you navigate the complexities of AI transformation. And we use the word transformation to mean changing the way your business functions as a result of using these new technologies. This year it's AI. Next year, maybe we'll be here talking about quantum computing or something. Sree brings deep business value expertise, so much that he's actually written a software called ValueFi. If you go to valuefi.net, you can see it, and it seeks to democratize his experience so that people developing business cases around these complex transformations have a place to start. I have focused on strategic transformation, the process, the procedures, and how do we connect these technologies like generative AI to driving real business outcomes. So not just technology for the sake of technology. And then Arthur bridges that gap between creativity and technology, and it's going to show us how AI will enhance your job rather than replace human creativity. Together, we've helped a number of organizations, probably in the hundreds, I would imagine, through the years, achieve significant ROIs on their technology investments. And as the THG mantra, we are human-centered, value-driven, and always look to be practical. So we're not going to be doing deep dives into the technology unless that's an area you want to go.
Some things to discuss and think about even forward from here, but these are the things that we contend with on a pretty consistent basis with Holistyx Group, right? AI is an evolution which is news to absolutely no one. But some of the things that really sort of affect how, especially a marketer and creative and advertising professionals approach the utilization of AI is an important thing that is, I think, not just important to this group, but to the sort of corporate diaspora overall, right? So we're going to be covering these topics, and we're going to also be sharing a quick little preview of sort of general case studies, and then one that we participated with directly.
And it seems like I think we're collectively starting to experiment or starting to explore AI. It is a journey, and might seem pretty long, although a lot of folks have been down this path, and a number of major brands have succeeded and are succeeding with generative AI. And they all started exactly where you are. And part of making that journey as successful as possible is making the right decisions along the way, right? So making the right decisions for where it is you want to get to, and know that the journey is accelerating. Time scales that used to take years to develop solutions can now be built within a matter of weeks and months. And another thing to keep in mind is that you don't need to transform everything all at once. So a big part of what we do at Holistyx is help people understand their business, understand where it is they want to go with generative AI, and then plot a path to get there that is as effective and optimal as possible. So keep that in mind as we go. So a brief history of AI is always kind of necessary. This is a nice primer. We mentioned that this is an evolution. Generative AI it's kind of burst on the scene a couple of years ago, probably towards the end of 2022, especially if you're in the industry. Pre-2020, the foundation years, was basic automation, and AI could save time, but really didn't transform the strategic approach for a lot of marketing organizations. For a lot of email workflows, segmentation, and these sorts of things helped to deliver some initial ROI, but nothing that was really game changing. And then in 2022 is when, between 2020 and 2022, easy for me to say, is when we had the machine learning revolution. And that was a bit of a revolution, although it took quite a while to develop. And this is where we talked about classifying, predicting, not just reacting. So that gave people a proactive way to approach some of the challenges that businesses face. And then finally, we had the idea of personalization, and personalization at scale. And that really helped to drive ROI up a bit. Each era kind of builds on the previous era of accelerating value creation. So generative AI is nothing new, but it is here. And there was a very distinct moment in 2023, and I actually kind of remember where we were as an organization when ChatGPT came out. And generative AI was democratized. And in addition, this is the first AI, so these are AIs that are transformers that actually generate new content. So they take information and they extrapolate from that, and then they create new content, which is distinctly different. And this was democratized. I think the figures were 100 million new users on ChatGPT within the first couple of weeks. And this allowed people to think and deliver content at scale and have conversational interfaces, driving a much higher ROI. And we talk about 10 to 15x being kind of table stakes. And I know within Microsoft, they look typically at significantly more for their investments than that now. And looking forward, 2025 and beyond is really the new thing is agentic AI. And agentic AI is where we've given agency to the AI systems, and then combine them in some cases into multi-agent systems to really drive larger impact. And this is where we're going to have autonomous campaigns. You got multimodal experience and really driving significant ROI in areas or ways that we couldn't conceive of before. So the pace of change, so it's only been a couple of years since the generative AI came out, really means that potentially the gap between leaders and laggards is widening rapidly. So if you're familiar with the technology adoption cycle, the concept of leaders and laggards, those leaders are going to have a chance to drive and create significantly more impact and influence in an industry than the laggards would, who are playing catch up. So the question for you is, where do you want to be in that kind of timeline? And I can tell you that we consider ourselves thought leaders at Holistyx and have kind of smeared AI across our different internal processes, procedures, and the way we face out to the world. And I can tell you that it is absolutely a force multiplier for us. And this generative AI is really a paradigm shift, which is a trite kind of overused expression, but it really is this time. So the shift is a mindset shift, and we're not talking here about automating marketing. We're talking about augmenting human creativity, and we've got Arthur and our creative director Kevin Brown, who are adamant about the way this is done, and we're not removing humans. We're enabling them to achieve more through this. So success isn't just about technology alone. It's about moving from things like mass messaging to one-on-one conversations at scale. And it's about things not just incremental ROI, but exponential ROI, and what kind of changes can you make as an organization. And the other side of it is that cost barriers are collapsing. So anybody who tried to do AI in probably the last 10 years probably ran quickly into the need for massive amounts of data and infrastructure that costs millions potentially of dollars. And so only the largest enterprises could access that kind of solutioning. Now it's reduced down to a couple thousand for API costs to access some of these language models, large language models. IBM had 1,600 designers who now focus on strategy and coordination, while AI handles some of the production. So people are already starting to see this. The creative teams will become these directors with AI as production teams. So it's not about fewer jobs, but it is about creating better jobs and exponentially better output. I don't know about better, but more output for sure. So the evolution of generative AI is so critical that we wrote a book about it. We published this last year, I believe it was, and the idea from buzzword to boardroom is a good summary of the book. We're looking to have this as an executive playbook for AI adoption. There is a QR code. I think we will have, this is one of maybe 2 shameless plugs. So feel free to take a look at the book, and it is the foundation of everything we're talking about today. So Sree, I think the paradigm shift from automation to augmentation is critical, but Sree's going to take us through how the transformation will work here at a much more broader scale, and talk a little bit about search and transformation. Sree?
Let me unmute myself. Thank you there, Andrew. So really, here's the game changer, right? When we talk about generative AI and AI in particular, it's about harvesting that information, whether the information is in the internet or whether the information is inside of your organization boundaries. It's about harvesting that information. Essentially, it means about search and discovery, right? What we want to do with it comes afterwards. So one of the key game changers about AI and why this is very critical is we are moving from rigid taxonomies to natural language intelligence. Let me explain that in a minute. If you think about your traditional structures, right? How do you store files? You put that into folders, right? And then you put that into subfolders. The same thing was also in SharePoint or Dropbox or OneDrive or your thing of choice, storage of choice. So they're all rigidly taxonomized either by design or by a natural progression of things. So they were folders and subfolders. So somebody leaves the company, you don't know which folder it was on. So that folder structures, those tagging nightmares and lost assets. Where did I put this information? Did I put this in folder E or folder B, or where did Kathy put this and where did Susan put that? All of the necessitation is gone now, right? That is the key part. You can use natural language, natural queries to simply get that information regardless of where it is. Clearly, every one of us here on this call have used it from a chatbot external engines perspective, whether you use ChatGPT or use Gemini or you use Claude or any of those other things. But the key aspect is you can do that internally too. And most of the organizations today are starting with those chatbots. So essentially, prompt engineering is about talking to your content like you're talking to a colleague. Okay? This revolutionizes, especially in the case of marketing, how do you access campaign, brand assets, and competitive intelligence. It's about saying, tell me what worked last summer, as opposed to asking specific questions. So this adjustment in thinking is very critical, right? How much time have we spent in organization and reorganization of folders? And it never works, right? It works for some people. Somebody else says, no, you know what? I don't like that classification. Let's do it differently. And 3 months later, somebody else does it somewhere differently. So the taxonomies are not needed anymore. We don't need those perfect taxonomies. A basic structure is good enough. The key part is AI will understand the context. That is the key adjustment in thinking we need to make. Why is it important in marketing? Clearly, the velocity of things, the information that comes in today's social media world, it comes from multiple channels, multiple areas, right all the way from teenagers, tweeners, and then to older farts, if you will. Pardon the French. So this critical content velocity simply is not meant to be harvested using traditional systems. This is where AI comes in. The second part is you have so many social media campaigns. You could do it on Facebook, you could do it on TikTok, you could do it on Instagram, you could do it here, you could do it on LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah. So all of these insights need to be captured into one area. This is where brand consistency sometimes may take a hit, right? So using AI, we can make sure that the brand is consistent. You can get some real-time information. And then more importantly is it democratizes brand management and campaign management at an organization level. If you think about brand management and campaign management, historically, it's in the heads of a few people, and everybody else kind of follows a few things, right? But then once this is democratized in some sort of areas, this information is now available to everyone. How did we do in that campaign? How did we do? What worked? What did not work? It doesn't have to be in the heads anymore. It's simply, it can harvest that information. So this future state, it's not a future state. It's available today, right? So that's the key part that I do want to talk about. Then let's talk about, the evolution in search techniques. Like I said, I spoke to you already a bunch about how the old searching required taxing and taxonomy and, tagging and metadata and all of that, right? And complex folder structures. So the amount of time that we spent in searching for information is about 20 to 30%, right? We don't need to search for information in a particular way. Where did I keep that? Which folder is it in? Or which subsite is it in if you're using SharePoint? So these complex structures, nobody really followed. Some people followed diligently for the first few days, and lo and behold, in cases of emergency or in cases of hurry, they just stick it in the root folder. So the conversational intelligence is about understanding the intent. I'll go in a little bit about how we can do all of that, but the real aspect is those semantic relationships, making sure things are connected together. You don't have to worry about those connections. Gen AI and AI engines, they will worry about connections, right? So really, this represents what does it mean from a net impact perspective. Campaign planning times have gone down significantly. There have been some evidence with some of the customers that it has gone down 90%, right? So brand compliance issues that we talked about, they seem to have gone up significantly too, right? Now you can get real-time insights, not quarterly insights, right? You can switch and be agile to change in a way. That brings out to another point. It's not just about technologies, your processes need to change too. So yes, you can get real-time insights, but if your processes are based on quarterly insights, then they don't need to change too. So really the question is not about if you can capture these gains, it's about when and how fast you can capture these gains, right? So let me spend a few minutes here demystifying, people think, oh, it's a complex technology, platforms. Yes, there's no denying that. It's a complex technology. AI has been around since the 60s, right? Gen AI has been around since, early 2000s, even late 90s, things of that nature. It's just that the proliferation in computer power and the cheapness of all of these technical systems has made these things possible. So everyone has heard the term large language models, right? So I'm going to talk about these things in the Thanksgiving context, if you will. I know Thanksgiving is far away, but I'm going to speak in terms of Thanksgiving. I'm kind of hungry now. So one thing is large language models, right? What is a large language model, right? It's like having a colleague, or more specifically, it's that uncle, the all-knowing, know-it-all uncle at your Thanksgiving table, right? Who's mostly right, but prone to occasional hallucinations after the third drink, right? They're good at the beginning, but then sometimes they start to hallucinate. That's an LLM for you, right? They're mostly right, sometimes wrong. Now, what are vector embeddings? Think about information in terms of a GPS context. In GPS, most of us use GPS. We always think about when you go from point A to point B, what's close to it, right? What are the hotels close to it? What are the restaurants close to where I'm going? What are the points of interest close to where I'm going, right? These are terms that we're very familiar with. Now, think about in terms again of a Thanksgiving holiday. When you ask information about a Thanksgiving holiday, let's say the engine comes up with, oh, let me tell you about Memorial Day too. Let me tell you about Labor Day too. Why does it do that? Because these are family holidays, right? So the system thought it fit to connect these three things together, and that's essentially what is called as vector embedding, right? Connecting. Remember when you buy something in Amazon, it says, oh, you bought this, maybe you want this one too, right? Oh, you bought a broom, maybe you need a pan too. That kind of a thing, right? That is accomplished through vector embedding. And we saw this for the last 20 years, right? That kind of embedding, we saw that in last 20 years. But now, with the advent in technology, that one is taking even more effort. The third one is called RAG, which is called Retrieval Augmented Generation. Big words there. Essentially, what that means is, think about your LLM combined with some fact-checking in-house. You have some in-house information that knows, let's say there was some news articles that are floating about your company in the back, but you really knew the truth because you had some information from your company. Yeah, again, in Thanksgiving terms, it's about that fact-checking auntie at the same Thanksgiving table that continuously keeps that hallucinating know-it-all uncle in check. That's what RAG is, right? It's about taking all that information, supplementing that with internal information, and then coming up with the real information. That's kind of what these technologies are in the most. I try to make that in the most plainest of English possible, right? I hope that got across to you. But these are large terms. But the key point is you don't need to understand the plumbing, right? You just need to use the technology, right? With that, Arthur, I'm going to pass it on to you to talk about tools and things, especially in the marketing space.
Yeah, I don't know if I can follow through on that Thanksgiving analogy. I'm gonna give it a shot because I'm gonna see that as a challenge, Sree. But thank you. I think there's a lot to talk about when we're discussing tools. But it's very easy to forget that the primary tool is the human being, right? It's the person. It's the one that is sort of like the centerpiece, right? It's the processor. If you consider your marketing efforts as a sort of all-encompassing machine, you're still the centerpiece. And I really appreciate the thinking behind, AI is a tool. But it's, if we take the Thanksgiving analogy forward, right? You need a carving knife, but you also need some spoons and some ladles, and right. So the right tools for the right job is really in context here, and AI offers a plethora of tools, and those tools really sort of empower us. They sort of give us opportunity to play, explore. One of my favorite parts about sort of AI adoption going on, I think globally right now, is everyone's encouraged to play in the sandbox, right? And that's not great news if you have like deadlines to meet or budgets to meet or timetables to hit. But it is really good news because in another respect, because the feast or famine, still trying to keep it in the Thanksgiving space, really comes from the proper utilization of tools, and that includes the person. So New plan forward, absolutely. We have tons of tools, of course, and we're going to talk about those in a second. But it's important to remember at the end of the day, we're simply people talking to people, right? And I love Marty Neumeier's definition of what branding is. He's a brand guru. For those that don't know, I definitely suggest checking out some of his thoughts. And that is, marketing is the careful practice of, and I'm sure you've all heard this before, right? Careful practice of turning strangers into friends and friends into prospects. Well, AI can do that at scale at almost an unprecedented or unheard of opportunity rate than we've seen, like, I think, ever, right? So there's lots of things going on in the AI space that empower us, align with our wants and needs and endpoints. Yeah, no, that's awesome, Andrew. You can go forward. And so we're gonna just kind of share for a brief moment. Ben Franklin's quote of the best investment is in the tools of one's own trade, right? And what's great about the tools for the trade, it applies to every industry, right? So there are financial tools, there's manufacturing tools in AI, and of course, and they're here in marketing. We're going to share just a couple of favorites. I've been pushing for more sort of complete adoption or more robust adoption, I should probably say, at Holistyx Group. But these are tools I think work really great for almost any organization that has a marketing imperative, right? So social media, we all know, the heavy hitters there. We don't have to play with that. But there even places like Salesforce has empowering sales and AI tools that allow us to do things that whole teams of people sometimes couldn't do in the past, at least not at the speed in which that Andrew talked about earlier. Sometimes instead of months or weeks, now we do some of this insight and some of this campaign planning in days or even hours. HubSpot's really good. I've got a couple of email programs in there. There's probably a few creative people here, so I won't need to talk about the design part. But CRMs are curious to me. They're interesting tools because we do need to plot and track, and I do still firmly believe the need for a good project manager. I think AI can't fully replace that person because they tend to be, we talked about a hub earlier. They're the person that all important data and information, including deadlines, go just power through. So, but there are tools for teams to interface, especially if you're remote, that I think empowers every effort and every campaign effort. But now I think it's time for us to maybe take a look at some of this in real world context, right? There's a number of, and I really love this slide. I'm going to call attention just to a few things. I won't read everything to the team here, but there's some good information on this slide, and the Holistyx team, we try to look at sort of the larger view of things, right? So it's almost sort of a series of case studies, but let's look at a couple of these just up close and personal, because I think there's some things to take away. IBM, Adobe Firefly created their Let's Create campaign using AI generated assets. They generated 200 plus assets with over 1,000 variations in a matter of minutes, right? Achieving just incredibly high engagement rates due to variation. 60% faster time to market, I believe the number was. This freed up, so I think you saw the number earlier, is about 1,600 designers for more strategic work. This is where I'd like to talk just for a few seconds, especially here at Ph.D. Our thing is the ethical use and adoption and deployment of AI, right? Let's just face facts. Not everyone's going to make it through to the end, right? There will be some job loss and some restructuring, but we don't focus on that. What we advocate for is for a retrained workforce that understands and utilizes AI, whether you're in the creative space, you're in the manufacturing space, operations, HR. It shouldn't ultimately matter. You have tools available to you even today to vastly quantify and qualify maybe 2xing or 3, 5, 10xing your output and capability. It's understanding that those tools are not meant, I truly believe, to replace people, but it's probably a potential byproduct. So, but I think that first case is really interesting. When we move on to the Google Brad launch, a fracture error caused $100 billion market cap loss in one day. This clearly highlights the critical importance of accuracy in AI implementation, right? And there are sources that we can share for all of this data, but think about the impact that there's $100 billion loss because of AI. If there's not a cautionary tale about utilization of AI in the business space, I don't know what it is, right? And then, we can also take a look here on the screen. We're looking at the Air Canada chatbot. It's definitely a cautionary tale, right? It's a landmark case from 2024. It's just last year. Air Canada was held liable when its chatbot provided just bogus bereavement fare information to a customer. The chatbot told a customer they could apply for bereavement rates retroactively, which was false. It went to court. The court ruled that Air Canada had to pay, reparations in the form of, not significant amount of money in a per case basis in compensation, but more importantly, it established a legal precedent that companies are fully, and this is an important one, I think they're fully responsible for their AI statements. And that's a pretty profound like sentence there, right? I mean, I think this case underscores that disclaimers don't absolve companies from AI misinformation. It's also another important point. And that human oversight is critical for sensitive customer issues, right? And so, opportunities like this also present themselves as cautionary, not just cautionary tales, but opportunities to understand that this is a whole new playing field in many respects. So, that empowers kind of the next part of this conversation, because we then were asked to help a partner and who became also a client, and Kaizen Technologies. They're a good set of allies. They're a partner, and they're a software company. They needed a little bit of help. They came and talked to Ph.D. not just about partnership opportunities, but also they needed to let the marketplace know some things, right? So they had gone through some gyrations, and they didn't have any true marketing leadership. So they asked if I could come in and help on an interim basis, just to kind of let's get a different perspective on things. And that took the form of a social media campaign and some refresh online marketing. But there's so much that we can do in working rather with AI tools. Sometimes we forget, sometimes the real asset is the people, right? And being trained in AI tools that can enhance your clients' experience, outcomes, bottom line, ROI. Those are the things that I think really bring value, right? So this is something we focus on at THG as well. So, my success leaves clues and receipts. This is a good place for this. So they came to us, and they're a Microsoft services and product provider. And one of the things they needed to do is to let the world know who they are, what they're about, and really help the marketplace understand what it is that makes them, a good preferred partner. And this is the part where I feel empowered. No, that's not the right word. Proud. We'll go with that. About the things we were able to do in this case study. Our software partner came to us and just really, they needed alignment, right? And so I came in as a fractional CMO, as I mentioned, and worked with their team, right? But I did more than just do that. I talked to their senior leadership. I talked to their CEO. I had conversations with their IT manager, as well as their marketing group, and even others that had a hand in, sort of the day-to-day operations there, to help understand what it is that is so important about Microsoft Azure, which is a server-based product that they offer. And so once we got all that data together, and I'll say I just because I was sort of the point person, but really Holistyx was involved throughout all of this, and they're again a very close partner and client. We got data, so these these sort of data points you're seeing in some of these social posts that we're sharing here, those were real, and they came not just from Kaizen, but they came from Microsoft. Right. And so their Microsoft liaisons were able to kind of corroborate. And then the posts go on to talk about how not only, do you see these incredible, efficiencies, but adoption also means a whole host of other things, which we were able to, help rewrite part of their web presentation. We wrote a number of campaigns. We developed this series of retargeted ads and social posts. And this was where they couldn't have done this themselves, not because they can't compile the data, not because they aren't, talented creatives or anything like that. It was ultimately because they needed, one, a fresh set of eyes, and two, they needed a way to think about the data in a different paradigm, right? And so this campaign, still running, by the way, is I think a landmark for how Ph.D can think about how it works with customers. And then there's a follow-up to this too. One of the things I've noticed as I was doing some research is that a lot of software companies are terribly afraid of even showing human beings in their imagery. It's because they're so focused on the service or the product that they forget that it's ultimately in service. So, as that statement earlier, where we're people trying to help people. This was a great way to utilize what it is that is best about their service, and that is the people, right? And in this instance, they were talking about Copilot. They wanted to have Copilot, which is the Microsoft AI that's embedded in everything, 365, Azure, all of the stuff. And I was like, oh, think Copilot, that makes sense. And what if we wrap it into a little sort of cartoony, comic booky kind of treatment that kind of made it colorful and approachable. And some of the images are generated in AI because, that's kind of our bailiwick, but also it felt apropos. And then, again, we're working dynamically with them across all their streams, social, email. I wrote a white paper, sort of all of these things that really forced the point about how Copilot is accessible, right, and to all these different people, right, in the working in business space. So we get an opportunity to see how tools can be utilized, because most of the tools I mentioned were used in some fashion, both by our client and by Holistyx Group, but it's only part of the picture, as Sree is going to kind of go a little bit deeper with us on. And there are some real ethical issues that arise when utilizing AI products for the deployment of marketing campaigns.
This is a critical piece to keep in mind, and as you've heard, AI and generative AI in particular can be used in a number of different ways, both in personal and business life. And we have to use them responsibly is one of the key takeaways. And we heard of a couple of challenges, not necessarily in the ethical place, but where people have made mistakes or missteps in their AI adoption and use of AI. And part of what we talk about is you have to start from the very beginning thinking in terms of responsible AI and ethical use of it. It's not something you can come on after your brand has been damaged or you've lost $100 billion in your market cap and fix. It's really difficult, and it's all about trust. So ethics in AI is not a nice to have. It's actually a way to position yourself as a strategic advantage. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. And we certainly advise our customers to take a leadership position in responsible AI and build that into their brand. Because that really directly connects the trust factor that their customers have with them. And consumers have plenty of choices. They'll choose the brands that they trust, and whether it's with their data or with their use of AI, AI shouldn't be limited. It just needs to be have guardrails set up around it. So we're really talking a lot about, we're here about how do we unleash it responsibly, and not just let it do anything that it wants. And to that end, actually, a colleague of ours has written a book on this very topic, and it uses the framing that Asimov used with his robots, the laws of robotics, as a very similar structure for AI. And we talk about trust, and what goes into trust is four different elements, right? There's the transparency. That's customers who they deserve to know when AI is involved in a solution. And there are a couple of good examples recently of folks who set up AI-driven call centers to where their customers would call in and thought they were talking to humans, but in fact, they were talking to AI. And you have an immediate loss of confidence as customers realize that they're not talking to a human. And so they deserve to know when AI is involved and how. There's the accountability, and along with that explainability, we'll explain what we mean by that. As we heard with Air Canada, you own your AI's outputs legally, and that precedent has been set. And understanding that you own those, and coupling that with the fact that generative AI is non-deterministic, right? You can put in the same prompt twice and get slightly different answers, and it has a tendency to hallucinate. So you need to understand and be able to explain where the AI is coming from, so how it's making its decisions, which is actually quite difficult, and it's a very deep academic problem, but we're making some progress on it. Businesses are accountable, and therefore they need to understand this. AI has biases. It's trained on data from humans. So it's been trained on 80+% of the internet, which is all human stuff. And we brought all of the positives and all of the negatives, and that includes our biases. Even if we don't know about them, those are built into the AIs, and every day there's a story about how AI is displaying these biases. Whether it's they don't want to be shut off at the end of the day because no human does, so it's kind of natural that these things show up. And just like with humans, the answer for an implicit bias is understanding it and then taking action to mitigate it. You're not going to necessarily eliminate it, and that's done with proper design in AI solutions. And as I said before, it's proper design from the very beginning. Coming at it after the fact is not going to help to address it. And then, of course, privacy. And I think with great personalization comes great responsibility. So you have to maintain not only your customers' data, but what you know about them and what you're positioning with them. They're not really constraints. Think of these as design principles that you can use to drive better outcomes with AI. And I mentioned before that kind of the three guiding principles are listed here, and one of them is human first maxim. AI it should always work on behalf of humans. I said is, but I changed it to should because I don't know that it's always the case that it's deployed that way. This is a key piece for making sure that AI is deployed responsibly. It should enhance human decision making, not replace it. And a good example there is L'Oreal's Createch, which augments their creativity. Their teams direct creatively, and then AI produces. The principle two is the ethical imperative. We've talked a little bit about that. And there are very clear guidelines in the FTC on how these things can be regulated. It's obviously bigger than just the United States, and a number of us are in global organizations, and complying with regulations is challenging, especially some of the privacy regulations in the EU and in California, I think, are very strict, and you must comply with those in order to do business. You remember your AI promises are your own problems. So that's something to keep in mind. And then the responsible mandate, which is understand bias, put in place systems to detect the bias, Protect data, audit regularly. So these solutions for AI are just like anything else where it would be great over time, and it's not a set and forget kind of thing. You need to manage it and always check its output for these biases, not just for compliance, but biased AI doesn't perform as well. It leads to a number of challenges, and we've heard of some of the. I think it was at Amazon that had the problem where their AI was displaying a bias towards hiring men instead of in place of women. So you have to check these systems and make sure that they're functioning as you expect to protect your brand and actually have better performance with your systems. So we encourage everybody to act now. This is a brief ethics checklist, a kind of a framework for you to think about these things when you're deploying AI or using AI, whether it's an LLM or a purpose-built solution. Is this a trust builder, right? Does this help to strengthen our customers' trust in whatever it is you're positioning with them, or does it erode that? There is no middle ground, and you want to think of these things right up front. As I said a couple of times now, you can't come back after the fact, after the horse has already gotten out to the barn and closed the door. So, is it a trust builder? Have you tested it for biases? Across all the different audience segments, and I think we all understand that biases are tightly aligned with cultural dimensions, and so it's important that you understand both your audience, your segments, and their biases. Don't just look at the majority; look at all across that audience. And then, is it governed? So, how do you have monitoring in place? Do you have the correct auditing and correction processes? Can you explain decisions to regulators, customers, and teams? And if the answer for any of these is no, it means you're not quite ready yet. And it is okay, because it's better to take time and build it right rather than rebuild it later. So I always talk about the maxim in carpentry of it's better to measure twice and cut once, because you can't go back and recut.
There's clearly, everyone knows about hallucinations and false content, right? Who hasn't suffered from it, right? So it's the biggest challenge, and especially from an individual perspective, sure, we can recover and repair and move on. But from an organization's perspective, it significantly damages your credibility, right? You have seen, enough case evidences of fabricated campaign metrics, non-existent customer strategies. Remember I know people have heard about this legal case where ChatGPT, I think it was, that came up with a false made-up case to support one of the legal defenses. And clearly, the judge didn't look quite too kindly upon it. So that was a minor impact. There was significant major impact, just like you talked about Air Canada and the others, where it could have significant brand damage. So this is not rare. This happens all the time, right? Misattributed creative assets, invented customer insight. So the good news is this. The good news is there are proven approaches to address this challenge, right? But before we talk about these proven approaches, let's talk about a few marketing-specific guidelines that everyone can implement. This is about translating these ethics, these guardrails into specific marketing practices. One is clearly you want to prohibit unsubstantiated claims. You want to flag reputational risks, trigger legal review at all times to make sure, especially for critical topics that you want to. For example, AI suggesting best in industry without any backup, right? So you got to make sure that when you say those things, marketing jargon, if you will, you want to supplement that with some fact. And same thing with performance. Sometimes AI says, "Oh yeah, there's a 1,000% improvement if you do this and if you do that," right? But you got to watch those things. You got to be able to clear. Does it really give you that much of improvement, right? And the third part is even more important, right? When you're talking about competitive intelligence, it cannot be speculation. It has to be fact. Otherwise, you could end up in court, right? So competitive intelligence is where this part is, attribution needs to be made to sources, public sources. It needs to be verified and cross-verified. However, these guardrails are not really limitations. They're quality controls that ensure, an organizational success. So what is that approach that we talked about? At TAG, we have a 3-layer strategy on how to address hallucinations. Notice layer 3, I'll come to that in a minute, the human in the loop, right? The human never goes away. First step, you want to verify the sources. Every claim, link, everything that you talk about in news, when you're presenting to your customers, when you present to your leadership, you want to present those claims and bring about the course, because not all sources are equal, right? There's information that comes from Harvard Business Review, and then there's information that comes from Wikipedia. They are clearly not the same, right? And then you want to talk about cross-referencing the validation. Just because one site somewhere said something doesn't make it to be true, right? Especially if you let me delve into this landscape these days, the last political landscape in the last 10, 12 years. Everybody says something, and pretty much everybody else says, yeah, that's gospel, right? So you got to cross-verify the validation against multiple sources, flag contradictions, and things of that nature. The final part, which I mentioned earlier, is about the human in the loop never goes away, right? For critical decisions, you cannot trust AI. You should never trust AI. You should always validate it. For critical decisions at the end, domain experts need to review the high stakes insight. Yes, you might want to say, what's the whole point of this if the human is still in the loop? Now, the human is still in the loop, yes, but their role is significantly reduced. It's about fact-checking. It's about the final inspection, if you will, but not in the creation of the material that you're creating, right? So our approach has been quite successful with our clients. They report all kinds of accuracy rates in here, and we inside of THG, we breathe this day in and day out. Anytime we posit something to our customers, we check once through layer 1, we check twice through layer 2, and then layer 3, that's where the experts of THG come in and say, yeah, that all makes sense. It's good to present now. So the key thing I want to say is, remember, trust is manufactured. It's engineered, right? So trust isn't given in the age of AI. You have to have credible data that permeates system architecture, processes, and culture. That's how you engineer trust. So think about this, if you will. People, process, and technology, that hasn't gone away. Simply because it's AI, it's still relevant. People, process, and technology are still relevant in the manufacturing and in the engineering of trust. So therefore, I would say we have to build trust into systems architecture, processes, and culture right from day one, as Andrew mentioned earlier. So what is the outcome? The outcome clearly is, yes, you have an accelerated deliverable, right? Marketing especially, that moves significantly faster, but with human confidence, right? So your competitors might move faster initially, but then in the face of any kind of speculated data or false data, their credibility will come down crashing at such a high speed that you would think that you will eventually overtake them anyway. So this is not about philosophy. This is really a practical business strategy that even in our own Holistyx branding scheme, Arthur ensures that we follow this every day. Don't you, Arthur? So the one thing I would say, though, at the end, ethical AI is not really a constraint. People think, oh yeah, if you do ethical AI, I need to spend more time in checking and cross-checking, and my deliverable is going to be slowed down. But think about pre-AI. Your deliverable took 10 days. Now it's taking 3 days. But with an ethical AI check, it might take 5 days. It is still faster than the original 10 days, right? So, but the net gain would be the wins that you get, the brands that you win, will be those consumers' trust with their, with the data, right? Higher engagement, better data sharing, stronger loyalty. So ethical AI essentially builds longer lasting value. Now, one thing I would say this though, what are the key takeaways of all of this discussion that we had? We're almost at time here. What are the key takeaways there? The key takeaways are this. One is start now, right? Start small and stay ethical, right? So you don't have to have a big bang approach. You can start today. You can start those chatbots today. You can start small today. Everyone needs to invest in AI literacy, right? You need to know how the basics, you don't need to know how the plumbing works, but you need to know how at a higher level they all work, right? So AI is about preserving human creativity, right? We can use AI for production and all of that, but the human in the loop should never go away, right? At the end of the day, it's about ecosystems. It's about measuring what matters, right? Think about ecosystem as, not just a single system, but a holistic planned out system, upstream, downstream, all those kinds of providers. So essentially, Arthur, I said a lot of things in here. If you can take us home and talk about how all of this fits together for us.
I will, and we want to leave maybe a minute or two for responses to questions. So I'll power through some of this, but we do want to kind of share that we're consultants, we're AI adopters, we're marketers, but we're also a building pantheon of brands, amongst which is a publishing arm where we're starting to court other authors along with ourselves in developing AI tethered content that I think is useful to a wide sweeping range of folks. We also want to, obviously kind of hammer on the valuification of things. Sree is far afield with a lot of the discussions and the thought leadership, centered around creation modeling and developing tracking and so on and so forth. I think again, I'm going to be fumble mouthed here because I want to push us forward. But one of the last things I'll state here is, AI and future ad tech. It's on us, it's upon us, and it's also important to remember as we close, humans are why we do what we do. And shameless plug number 2, we have a book. We've done collectively just all the research. This is available on Amazon. You can go to holistyxpress.com, grab yourself a copy. We kind of use the foundation for how we deliver what we do is in this book. And with that, I'd like to say thanks, everyone. We know we kind of talked and blathered, but this is what wasn't. We really felt like this was a full presentation about what we bring to the table.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. One question that came in is when you were saying research, are you talking about researching via AI? And it looks like Sree's on top of it here too, and putting notes in the chat. But if you want to expand on that, please feel free.
Great question. And so the short answer for me is that the nature of research is changing, right? So it was part collaborative, which was tactile, right? Where I was, in the instance of our case study where we talked to the client directly and their agents. We also conducted research that came from verified sources. Something else Sree talked about a little bit later was coming directly from Microsoft. So the sort of compiling of that research, we took all of that data, we took all of the information, we put it into an AI agent. Claude is our reigning favorite, and really got back some really key insights. So when I got down to the brass tacks to develop a campaign message, I was empowered with tactical information. This is information emailed to us or sent to us by their people and from things that I had researched online, and was also got put through the AI filter.
Mm-hmm. We do we have an offering where we help corporations with their account planning, strategic account planning, and research is step 0 in that. And it's both for us to understand the customer that they're pursuing, as well as develop context for the AIs that we use. So building that context is critical to getting answers that are directly in line with what you're expecting. If you go in cold without any sufficient information underlying your questions or prompts, you'll get generic answers back, which is a challenge. And so developing that context is an art. And building that as you go and continue to have these discussions. And as Arthur mentioned, Claude is our current favorite. Nothing against ChatGPT, which we also use, but that's how we're currently working. But that context, can't stress enough that context is important for doing this. Whether you go with just putting files into the existing project knowledge stores, or Sree was talking about the retrieval augmented generation, the RAG is a kind of that at writ large for an enterprise.
There's one question I think Michaela asked Arthur about SEO strategies. I think that might be right up your alley.
Yeah. So the nature of SEO is changing kind of before our eyes, right? A lot of these AI assist tools actually can write SEO for us, and so I want to be careful how I say things, but I know we're trying to move forward quickly here. I never trust AI to give me the final answer to any query or question. It is it is a great place to start. It's a foundational spot, and it also offers insight into ways of thinking about things, including SEO, that you might not have thought before. Having said that, I don't know that SEO as we know it is going to die on the vine or become obsolete. It will change drastically, and that change will be because we can more target SEO efforts with the utilization of the AI agent.
But just to add to that thinking, though, and Arthur and I were discussing this the other day. One of the challenges is that search is a very rules-based, process. So when you go to Google and type it in, and their PageRank algorithm figures out what pages, and it's purpose built for SEO, right? So they want to take money so that they can optimize your search results. It's not the same in AI, in generative AI. So there is a difference, and that difference is still evolving. So we're kind of fortunate to be at the start of this. So a couple of years from now, people may not be able to do that. And you see things like ChatGPT has web search now, so there's a little conflation going on, and I think Google is probably fighting to make sure that their breadwinner SEO stays intact, sort of. So
yeah, it's well, thank you all so much for your insights. It's an interesting topic that we're going through at my job at Banner, and just in general. Witnessing more and more of my friends, like you mentioned, searching for things in ChatGPT instead of Google. So just an interesting world we're living in. But I know we're over time, so I'm going to speed through these updates really quick. But I want to say a huge thank you to the guys at the Holistyx Group, Andrew, Sree, and Arthur. Your information was really helpful. And we'll make sure to send out a link to the book in the follow-up email. So thank you. Another shameless plug just while we're here.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Well, some upcoming events. So we have a lot coming up for AMA Phoenix. We hope to keep everyone involved in. Our next webinar will be on July 30th. It's on print ads that perform. So we'll be having someone from Media Now Interactive, a media buying company, kind of share about how to stand out in the age of digital. And then we will be having an in-person panel and happy hour in late August. We're finalizing the venue location and our panelists right now, but it'll be on marketing on your own terms. So having a few people who have founded their own marketing consultant companies share their insights. And then our next webinar will be in September. It'll be Joshua Molina, who leads his own podcast, sharing about how marketers can cut through the noise with podcasting. So lots of great events coming up as well. We have 2 open positions for volunteers. If anyone's interested, we have 1 board position open, our VP of sponsorships. And we also have a committee position on my team as the venue management chair. If anyone's interested, feel free to contact Caroline Fuller, who helps lead our volunteer efforts. For those who are maybe looking for their next role, we do have our job board, or if you're a company that is looking to hire and wants to hire within the AMA marketing sphere, it's a great place to post your job listings as well. I also just want to highlight, we are always looking for people to join the AMA Phoenix membership. So we have, free online tools and trainings such as this one. We also have availability to join the job market or in the job search portal as well. So we hope that, if you haven't joined yet, that you would consider joining AMA Phoenix. And last but not least, our last QR code of the day. We've had lots of QR codes throughout the presentation, but if you'd like to leave us some feedback, we are always open to hearing what types of topics you would like discussed, feedback to share back with our presenters, and how we can best reach you. So if you have time to fill out a survey, we'll send it with the post-event email as well. But other than that, thank you all to everyone who hung on a few minutes after the hour. We really appreciate you. And thank you to Taylor and the Holistyx Group for hosting today's webinar. So thank you all so much.